As the UK continues heading in the wrong direction, economically, culturally, and in so many other ways, we're getting more British clients asking, how do I escape and how do I get a second passport? And today, we're going to talk about what you should know as a British citizen and what the best second passport options are. Even if you're not British, you can extrapolate this advice to your own situation. If you're Canadian, if you're Australian, if you're from somewhere else in Europe, chances are you want to protect yourself from the craziness that's going on in the world right now as well. But the first question I ask someone who comes to me and says, I need a second passport is, why exactly do you need it? I'll tell you a story. I was sitting here in my home in Bogota a couple of years ago. I was talking to a gentleman who had hired us, and he said, I need a second passport. I said, why? He said, well, I want to make sure when I leave Australia, I don't have to pay tax. Now, the same situation could apply to someone in the UK. And I said, well, if that's the only reason you're getting it, we can help you go through the tax non-residence process. There's going to be things you need to do to satisfy in Australia the ATO, in the UK the HMRC. You need to show them that you're moving yourself, moving some of your ties out of the country, you're leaving. But once you do that, and once you do it legally with our network of tax experts that we have all around the world, when we work with you, then you're out of their tax system. I said, a country like the United Kingdom, a country like Australia, they may introduce what the US has, which is called citizenship-based taxation, where no matter where you live, yes, there are ways to reduce the tax. There's exemptions, there's exclusions, there's treaties, but you're still in the tax no matter where you go. That does not apply to anyone else in the world. France has been flirting with it this year. There are other countries that have much more minor restrictions when you leave, but generally speaking, the US is the only country that does that. I've been telling you for years more countries may do that, and so having that second passport is a defense mechanism. You could say, you know what? Here's my British passport back. I don't agree with that. It's wrong of you to tax me to pay for services I don't receive. I'm living here. If I'm going to pay tax to anyone, it's where I live. Take your passport back. I'm already St. Lucian. I'm already something else. And so, understanding you can leave your country, whether you're just tired of the lack of social cohesion, whether you're tired of increasing crime rates, whether you're tired of paying high taxes that are going even higher, you can do that by getting a residence permit in another country, exiting your country's tax system. And then the idea is, okay, do we work towards a second passport over a longer term horizon? Why would you want a second passport? I argue if you're a successful person, you really want 3 passports these days. You want a little bit of geopolitical diversification. You want different options depending on which way the world goes. We have some clients, they'll get a European Union citizenship by descent. If you're British, maybe you have Irish ancestry. Go and look at that. You can go back 2 generations in most cases, in some cases 3. Could you claim an Irish passport? Now you've got access to all those EU countries that you can live in. You can travel as an EU citizen, right? Other clients of ours will have, and I think maybe this Australian guy was one of them, Greek ancestry. You could go and claim your Greek passport. If you have Italian ancestry, your Italian passport. If you have no ancestry and you want an EU passport and you have about $1 million or 750,000 pounds to donate and pay in fees, you can go to Malta and you can get that passport in about 18 months. We have a number of our high net worth clients saying, I will donate money to Malta. Now I can live, travel, be as a European Union citizen. I can no longer do that as a UK citizen. And then I can do things like I can go and live in Switzerland. I can pay half the tax of a non-European. And so those kinds of passports will take different amounts of time. A citizenship by descent might take 3 or 4 years, depending on the country. Malta will take 18 months. A Caribbean citizenship by investment, they're taking longer these days because there's more regulations. The price went up under pressure from Western countries. They don't want you to escape, but that's going to take you about a year. The thing is, what if you ever wanted to divorce your country? When do you think that will need to be? And when would you be living overseas long enough that you'd be willing to do that? I had the idea when I was a kid that maybe I wouldn't want to be a US citizen. And before I left the US, I was pretty clear, I will not want to be a citizen of this country for that long. But you know what? I didn't just give up my citizenship and move overseas. I spent a number of years living in many different places, traveling, feeling what it was like. And only then was I willing to give up the citizenship. So my advice to British citizens is you want to make your plan B into a plan A now. Taxes are going up. Labor is doing a lot of crazy stuff. The country's going in the wrong direction. Why don't you move overseas now, see how you feel about it, and we could work with you to figure out, okay, do I want to get a passport in a year? Is that worth $200,000 plus fees? Do I want to get a passport in a little bit longer, but it's a better quality one in Europe? And I'm going to pay close to $1 million for that. Or do I want to rely on my ancestry that could take 3 or 4 years? Or do Do I want to move to another country and get my passport that way? That could take 3, 5, 10 years, depending on where I move. But let's go back to why you want a second passport. Your country no longer serves you. They put burdensome rules, taxes, regulations, restrictions on you that make it either difficult to live overseas, or you just disagree with it. I mean, there's some folks who call us, they want to give up their US citizenship, they want to get a second passport to do that. They just say, I think the US policy is wrong. I think it's immoral the way they treat their citizens. I don't want to be a part of that. And so they get a second passport and they leave. So that's the first reason you'd want a second passport, to divorce your country if it becomes a burden. The other reason is, there's talk of World War III. There's talk of increasing ascendance by the global South. They're less favorable towards the West as they have been in the past. What if you ever want a separate identity? Not doing anything sketchy like changing your name, nothing like that, but just a separate nationality by which to travel. If you want to do business, if you want to do investments, if you want to travel to other countries, is there a time in the future where the UK, or again any other country, is going to become a burden on you? We're seeing, again, here in Colombia, the UK cut off visa-free access for Colombians because they say, oh, we've had an increase in asylum applications, all that kind of stuff. So what did Colombia do in return? Oh, now UK citizens need a visa to come here. Now, you might say, hey, what do I care about one country? What do I care about one visa? By admission, when I gave up U.S. citizenship, I had to apply for 2 or 3 visas. I don't apply for very many visas at all anymore. But applying for a visa is not that difficult. I mean, to the U.S. maybe, but to most countries it's not. But what if that were done, 10, 20, 100-fold? Because a bunch of countries got together and said, hey, we don't want, UK citizens investing here. What if you had to accept suboptimal investment returns? Or you couldn't bank in certain places? Americans know that. Americans can't go to many countries and bank. Now, there's many they can, but most Swiss banks don't want them. Plenty of Singaporean banks don't want them to do much of anything. So what if your country, again, becomes a burden? You might want to keep your passport, but in some cases, we've seen this with crypto investors, hey, they don't care if I'm also British, they don't care if I'm also American, but if I have this separate passport, then they'll offer me more services, they'll offer me more investments, I can make higher returns. And so that's why you want a second passport if you don't have the US issue of citizenship-based taxation. The question is, how long do you want to wait before you get that passport delivered? My thing is, I've gotten a number of different second citizenships. Sometimes I didn't exactly know what specific issue I was solving. I just realized, I think this will come in handy. And I've been proven correct in many cases. But I got them years in advance. That's why I say, better years too early than a day too late. You want to get second passports before you think there could be an issue. So if you have an 8-figure net worth, yeah, you should probably go out and spend some money and get some kind of citizenship by investment, whether it's in Malta, which they technically call the MEIN, whether it's in the Caribbean or anywhere else. Get that passport now, because if you're an 8-figure guy, you've got a target on your back and it's just worth a small sum of money to get protected. If you don't have that much money, can you wait a year? Can you wait 2 years? Can you wait 5 years? People who are leaving the UK and saying, do I need a second passport? In many cases, no. Again, if you have 20 million pounds, spend 750 pounds on Malta, get that EU access back, cover yourself, you're in good shape. If you don't want to spend so much, you can get a golden visa. Portugal has the one program that, even though they've been very slow, I think they've made some amends for being slow. You don't have to live in Portugal, but you can work towards that Portuguese citizenship. Now, unlike in Malta, where they do speak English, in Portugal, you'll need to learn some basic Portuguese. So the more you pay, the less you have to do. In Portugal, you don't have to live there, but if you make an investment, you can get on a fast track to citizenship in about 5 years, plus a year of waiting. That's the same thing as Malta. Would you rather pay 750,000 pounds? Or would you rather invest half that amount that you can actually recover in the future, but you have to wait 4 more years and you have to learn a little bit of Portuguese? You can decide. I'm not saying you should live in Portugal. It's not tax friendly anymore. Why would you move to a country? Why would you go through all the hassle not to save much in taxes? But you could have the Portugal Golden Visa and work towards the passport that way. Do you think you have 6 years before labor is going to do something to you? I don't know. If you're going to move somewhere, why not get the residence permit? Italy has a golden visa. They call it something a little bit different. Many people who move to Italy, they just get a regular off-the-shelf residence permit that requires you to live there. But if you want to live there, no big deal. Golden visas are better for the optionality of not having to live there. If you really want to live in Italy, get a regular residence permit. And if you do that, you're going to get a second passport. It's probably going to take you about a decade, but they have a pretty favorable tax regime, particularly if you are wealthy. If you just want to pay less tax and that's your main priority, again, how long before the British government could bring in citizenship-based taxation? And so if you're going to live in a place like the UAE, in Dubai, if you're going to live in Malaysia, where I spend time, those are very tax-friendly places. And I think they'll continue to be relatively tax-friendly. But you're not going to get citizenship, so you're not solving the problem of, is the UK going to come after me? So bottom line, escape the UK because you're tired of all the stuff that's happening there. You can get out of the tax, out of the high crime, out of the bad weather, out of the bad food, out of the lack of social cohesion. That does not require a passport. But when you look at what do all those things lead to in some of these countries, what's the trend? I do think the trend is big Western legacy brand countries that are going to come and say, you owe us a pound of flesh no matter where you live, and that's what you're protecting against. Quite frankly, do I want to think they're going to take 6 years to get there? They very well might. They very well never do it in the UK. But when France, on 2 different occasions this year, said, let's tax our citizens no matter where they live, what did they do? They said, hey, if you're paying high taxes somewhere else, you're cool. But if you're moving somewhere with lower taxes, we're coming for you. That's the very thing that I find personally insulting. That's the kind of reason you'd want a second passport as a British citizen, on top of, am I worried about losing investment, banking, or travel opportunities if countries around the world where I'm being diversified turn against the UK? Now, some of these things are a bit far-fetched, but again, better years too early than a day too late, better prepared than not. To me, the question depends on your net worth. Again, if you have 20 million pounds, I don't know your particular situation, but I can see why spending, a couple percent of that to get the creme de la creme of passports is worth it. If you have 5 million pounds, yeah, I've talked to plenty of British clients in years past. Caribbean citizenship, tax-friendly countries, speaks English, good flights from London, that could be an option, right? Time zone's not that different if that matters to you. You don't have to live in those countries, but you could, right? I mean, that could be worth it. So that's the kind of thing we do for folks. If you go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, we ask you to have $1 million in liquid assets, so 750,000 pounds or so in liquid assets, or have an annual income profit of $500,000 or more. We do work with folks up to and including 9 and 10-figure business owners, but we work with folks who are just everyday millionaires, and we help them leave their country. And we understand what you're trying to accomplish, because you don't want to follow the herd to Dubai and pay more tax than you might have to somewhere else if that's not where you want to go. And so we have more options than anybody else. It's a one-stop shop, and I think we've worked with so many British clients that both singles and families, we're going to really understand where you're coming from. And make sure you don't spend more money than you need to on things like second passports if that's not what it takes to solve your problem.